Welcome back to the fourth edition of the Bay Area Beat. I am beyond stoked about today's episode. We're going to spend our 20 minutes discussing all things Warriors, from the Jimmy effect to the rest of the season outlook, and close with a toast to Andre Iguodola on his jersey retirement. So, a little context about myself. The last couple years, I've been living in the Big Apple, New York City. And for years, that hadn't deterred me from staying up 3 times a week watching the Warriors until 1 a.m. But around mid-January of this year, I was starting to hit my breaking point. More than once, I had decided to turn off the game around halftime and give myself those extra hours of sleep, which for me was a deep internal conflict. But the Dubs no longer felt like they deserved my time or my sleep deprivation. Since 22, it felt like the Warriors were stuck in a hopeless path with no real direction. I had even begun to get sad thinking about Steph going out like Kobe did on terrible, non-contending teams where he was the only draw. But then the Jimmy Butler trade happened. Since the trade, the Warriors are 6-1. They've blown out their last 3 opponents, and the vibes around the team have completely 180'd. Not only does this look like a new basketball team and Steph and Dre are re-energized, but even the crowd has sensed the momentum shift, and you could hear it on Sunday against the Mavs, when even over the broadcast, the famous Warriors, Warriors was echoing through the Chase Center. Finally, the Warriors are fun again, and that should invoke fear across the rest of the league. Now, I brag when I'm right, like I did when I said back in May the Niners should have drafted Cooper DeJean in the first, but I also put my hand up when I was wrong. At the time of the trade, I was glad the Warriors traded for Butler because it finally showed that the front office was committed to extending the last of Steph's window, which for years didn't feel like the case. But I also really wanted Durant and thought that with his ceiling, he was the only player that could make the Warriors legitimate contenders in the West. I'm not going to say after 7 games and a couple beatdowns of crappy teams that the Warriors are going to win the finals, but I will say that I never could have imagined just how unbelievable of a compliment he would be to Steph on the offensive end and Dre on the defensive end. I talked in the first episode after the trade that Butler would make everyone's lives around him easier, but I didn't think that meant turning Brandon Podjemski and Moses Moody into elite role players and be the best thing that ever happened to their careers. So on both fronts, I am happy to say I was wrong. And also, shout out to Pat Riley for lighting a fire under Jimmy's ass and making him more motivated than ever. But let's look at some numbers to see just how valuable Jimmy's been. Butler is the first Warrior in team history to have 120 points, 30 rebounds, and 30 assists through the team's first 6 games. While Butler has been a slight scoring upgrade over Wiggins, averaging around 20 points a game, what separates him is all the little things he's doing. Since his debut, Jimmy's second on the team in both assists and rebounds per game. But his playmaking is what really has shocked me the most. He's perfectly content getting everyone else involved early and has a knack for drawing defenders and finding open looks for shooters like Steph, Moody, and Buddy Hield. He does this all while averaging less than a turnover a game, which, as any Warrior fan would tell you, has been their kryptonite, even at their peak with Kevin Durant. Teams now have to treat him as a threat and can no longer play drop coverage on every screen and double Steph like they would when Wiggins was out there. Another stat that shows how meaningful Jimmy's been to the Dubs: through the Warriors' first 51 games of the season, they were 10th in defensive rating and 18th in offensive rating, with a net of 16th in the league. And honestly, I'm a little surprised they were as high as 18th offensively. It felt like they were going weeks without getting shots to fall. But since the trade, they're now 6th in the league offensively and 2nd in the league on defensive rating and are 3rd in net. While the Warriors prior still had a top 10 defense, he has elevated to another stratosphere as they're forcing an astonishing 19 turnovers a game, best in the league since the All-Star break. Offensively, his paint scoring and facilitating has given them a balanced attack and is critical if they actually wanted to go anywhere in the playoffs. One of the last stats I think helps tell just how impactful Jimmy has been is how much they've improved their free throws. Before the trade, the Warriors were in the bottom 5 in both free throw attempts per game as well as free throw percentage. In the 7 games since, the Warriors are first in the NBA in free throws made with 131 and second in free throw percentage at 86%. Even if the team free throw percentage dwindles a tad with Jonathan Kuminga coming back in the coming weeks, Jimmy has helped plug one of their biggest holes and has made them more dynamic and more difficult for teams to prepare for. Even though it's only been 7 games, I don't think it's hyperbolic to say Jimmy is the best teammate Steph's had since Kevin Durant back in 2019. After the title year in 2022, the Warriors have desperately struggled to get any offense going when Steph was off the court. Through the team's first 51 games, they had a negative 90 net rating when Curry was on the bench. But with Butler, they have been plus 30 in the minutes when Steph sits. Now, you look at games like the one against Dallas on Sunday, when Steph subbed out during his normal 3-minute mark in the first. They were up 20-11, and in the 7 minutes while Steph was on the bench, the Warriors outscored the Mavs by 9, mounting a seismic 43-23 lead, and the game already felt like it was out of reach for Dallas by the time Steph came back in. He also didn't have to play in the fourth, nor has he in the last couple of games, which should only keep him fresh with the Warriors fully set on the playoffs. You can also tell that Steph has his aura back and a real sense of belief in his team. His revenge night-night on PJ Washington in the third quarter against the Mavs while Klay couldn't even look in Steph's direction was his earliest in a game since Game 6 in Boston of the 2022 Finals. And while the Warriors were up 24 at the time, as any fan who's watched this team this year knows, no lead has been safe. But Steph knew that when he went off the floor and Jimmy, Dre, and Pod stayed on, that teams were going to have a hell of a time scoring on that trio. Draymond now all of a sudden looks like 2017 Defensive Player of the Year Dre, and the rest of the team is feeding off his energy. Like Steph, Dre knows a thing or two about championship makeup and has been very vocal both during the All-Star weekend as well as on his own podcast that he thinks this Warrior team will win a title. And while I'm not quite there yet, their defense with Butler looks the closest to what they had with Andre Iguodola. They are an incredibly smart group that thrives on playing help team defense. With both Draymond and Jimmy, it's like the Dubs have 2 quarterbacks calling out assignments and rotations on defense. In the 108 minutes that Dre, Jimmy, and Pods have played together, the team is plus 58 with a 98 net defensive rating, which means on average, teams score 98 points per 100 possessions against that trio, which would easily be atop the league across a full season. Maybe the biggest revelation following Butler's trade is just how good Pods and Moody have been in their expanded role. Not only is the loss of role players like Wiggins and Schroeder opened up more minutes for the young guns, but they've excelled with the open looks that they are getting from the gravity that Jimmy pulls. Since the trade, Moses is averaging 14 points a game on 41% three-point shooting and a 67% true shooting percentage, which is absurd. The Warriors are also 10-0 when Moses Moody starts on the season. Now, Pods, he's taken his game to a whole nother level. He's leading the team in plus minus since Jimmy's arrival at plus 132, which is actually something he did last season as a rookie. And again, it sounds cliche, but he's truly been a jack of all trades. Some nights it's his scoring that's helped the Warriors. Other nights it's his elite rebounding from the guard position, where we saw that firsthand against Dallas when he had a career high 13. Regardless of how he's shooting the ball, Pods is always doing the little things right. He's a connective passer, always swinging and finding the open man. On defense, he's as gritty as they get, going for loose balls, causing deflections, often guarding the opposing team's best guard, and just being an all-around pest. While Jimmy has certainly made Moody and Pods' lives easier, they have without a doubt taken the next leap as players. This is the type of growth that made the Warriors so hesitant to trade them during the offseason. Now, the last guy I want to highlight is Quentin Post. Post, in his limited minutes has been exactly what the Warriors have been looking for years as a center who can space the floor. He's shooting 42% from three on the season, but honestly, it feels like every big one goes in. The way Kerr has been using him has also been fascinating. He comes in at the start of the second and fourth quarter, replaces Steph while the other four starters are still on the floor. It's definitely a unique rotation, swapping out a veteran point guard for a rookie center, but it allows Quentin to just sit in the corner on offense and wait for the open look while Jimmy, Pods, Draymond draw a double, go into the basket. And while I'm not entirely sure what type of role Post will have come playoffs, he's giving the Warriors another look to throw at teams and allowing Kevon Looney to stay fresh for the playoffs. Now, as I tape this episode on Thursday, February 27th, the Warriors are currently the 8th seed in an extremely tight playoff race. They are just a half game back of the Clippers and Wolves for the 6 and 7 seeds and a half game up of the Mavs and Kings for the 9 and 10 seeds. The teams behind Sacramento, the Spurs and the Suns, are both in a bit of a free fall, so it's very unlikely that the Warriors fall out of the play-in. The Dubs also have the tiebreaker against the Wolves as they're 3-1 against them this season and won't play them again. But unfortunately, they don't have the tiebreaker against the Clippers where they're 0-3 against LA. However, they do play the Clippers in the final game of this season in San Francisco, which in all likelihood could be for the 6th seed. They would need to be at least tied going into it, but a win would push them over and clinch the seed. If the Warriors do continue this hot streak and the Lakers and or Rockets fall into a major tailspin, there is an outside chance that they could catch them for either the 4 or 5 seed, but being 5 back with 24 to play, it would take either of those teams falling off a cliff and the Warriors winning nearly every game for them to sneak into the top 5. The Dubs currently have the 10th easiest remaining schedule in the league, while Minnesota has the 2nd easiest and the Clippers have the 7th toughest. Now, let's look at some odds. Vegas bookmakers have the Warriors as the most likely to make the playoffs amongst that group. They're currently minus 650, an implied probability of 87%, while the Wolves closely trail at 86% before a drop-off with the Clippers at 70%. Dallas is currently at 49%, and then there's another big drop-off with the Kings and Suns at 21% and 12% respectively. Okay, I know I just number vomited all over you, but I can simplify these things a little bit. What these odds suggest is that books have the Warriors at almost a 90% chance to make the playoffs, and they also see them as the biggest contenders for that 6th seed in the West, which, as Dubs fans know, is crucial to avoiding the play-in where they are currently 0-3 lifetime. The Warriors also have the 5th highest odds of winning the West at 7%, just narrowly behind Memphis at 8%, and nearly double the probability of the Clippers, and actually almost triple the probability of the Rockets, Wolves, and Mavs. Now, I'm not saying these odds are gospel, but bookmakers whose entire job is to set the best lines possible see the Warriors as a legitimate threat in the West, which is a stark contrast to where they were just a month ago, where they sat at closer to 18% to make the playoffs. With all this hyping up the Dubs, I want to get out and say I'm also not completely naive. I know the Warriors' last 3 games have come against the Kings, the injured Mavs, and the awful, awful Charlotte Hornets. And while I don't want to put too much weight into beating up on these bad teams, these were all massive blowouts from pretty much the tip. These were the type of games that the Warriors usually let a team hang around in, and in many instances would blow late in the 4th quarter. They will have a couple tough games on this upcoming road trip against the Magic, against the Knicks in the Garden, which should give us a little more clarity on just how good this team is. But the Warriors being 5.5-point favorites in Orlando against a healthy Magic team shows how sportsbooks view them. So I came out of the All-Star break hoping the Warriors would go around 17-10, but from what I've seen the last couple of games, I think it's very reasonable to see them going closer to 20-7, which may be needed to secure the 6th seed and avoid the play-in. Right now, the Grizzlies and Nuggets are tied for the 2 and 3 seeds, and While Denver does scare me, I would be elated to go against Memphis in the first round of the playoffs. We already saw how that turned out in 2022. The Warriors have also done all this without their second leading scorer from the first half of the season in Jonathan Kuminga, who's still nursing a severely sprained ankle. He's been practicing more with the team the last week and doing 2-on-2 drills. I think the Dubs are hoping to have him back at some point during the road trip, but with just how well the team has been playing and gelling together, they don't seem to be in any rush to do so. His new role will certainly be interesting with Jimmy, though, as they have certain similar archetypes as someone who can create their own shot and does the majority of the dirty work from the paint. I hope Steve Kerr staggers him and Butler's minutes and allows Kuminga to play more with Steph so he has more space to attack while teams are still throwing doubles at Steph. I do have a lot of optimism about what Kuminga will look like on this team, but I'm also concerned that with his slightly slower processing speed, it may prevent him from playing in real crunch time. At his worst, Kuminga will just be another body to throw in the rotation to hopefully relieve some of Draymond's minutes and keep him fresh and healthy for the next stretch run. I want to close by giving an ode to Andre Iguodola following his jersey retirement and his incredible 8-year career in Golden State. As Bob Myers said it best during the ceremony, he was the first to choose the Warriors and see the vision. Iggy was the ultimate culture changer, bringing a team who had made the playoffs twice in 15 years and helped lead them to 6 NBA finals, 4 NBA championships, and finished with an insane 23-4 playoff series record. His willingness to come off the bench during his prime just showed how unselfish and how committed he was to winning. And obviously, it paid off, not only with the 4 rings, but Andre finished his career with the highest winning percentage in NBA history on one team at 75%, narrowly beating out Magic Johnson for second at 73%. His career culminated in a 2015 Finals MVP, but he had so many incredible moments in between. Him gassing up Andrew Wiggins on the sideline in the 2022 NBA Finals is one that I always think of. Even though Andre was out of the rotation at that point in his late 30s, he stayed locked in, keeping everyone focused and accountable. Whatever he said to Wiggins in that moment clearly worked, as Andrew played the best basketball of his career during that series. Congrats to Iggy on an incredible career and being the embodiment of strength in numbers. Without him coming to the Warriors, there aren't championships, much less a dynasty. The first of 5 to get his jersey retired from this era. Cheers to you, Andre. That will do it for me today. Next week, we'll look back at the NFL Combine for any notable Niner standouts, and hopefully we'll be having a Brock Purdy contract extension conversation. We'll also do a short catch-up and any takeaways from Giants spring training and recap how this Warriors fare on this next slightly tougher stretch. But until next time, peace.